Hi, everyone. We are back with another episode of Grad with Asha, and I am Asha Creary, licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas and licensed professional counselor approved supervisor in the state of Missouri. And today, I just want to do a quick video in regard to knowing when it's time to seek a new supervisor. So as you guys know, I am more so transitioning from seeing clients more face-to-face primarily to more into my supervisory role throughout the state of Missouri and eventually in the state of Texas. So this is something that myself and my former supervisor talk about all the time because we quite frequently know when it's time for us to have our practicum students or our site or our supervisees or our associates or provisionally licensed clinicians to transition out. Right. And we have our reasons for needing to swap out our students, or maybe, we've decided we're just no longer a good fit for them. But I wanted to talk about this from a lens of an associate or a provisionally licensed provider who is currently under supervision, who is struggling with their current supervisor and really determining when is a really good time to switch their supervisor. So the first thing that I would say in determining whether or not it's time for you to switch supervisors is when your needs are no longer being met. So oftentimes we start with the supervisor and in the beginning, the needs are being met, right? But then we grow and we reach a plateau and our needs are no longer being met because they're just either no longer being met or because you've gotten to a place of, again, stabilization, right? So the things that you guys are constantly going over and working over, you've met your goals and you've reached your peak at that. And now it's time for something new. And so if you are engaging in new things and your needs are not being met, it might be time to get a new supervisor. But before you decide to switch your supervisor, the first thing is to have a conversation with your supervisor. Now, just because this person is your supervisor and you feel like there may be a power struggle, just remind yourself that you're paying this person. You have employed this person. Now, according to the Texas Board Code of Ethics, you cannot employ your supervisor, but you're paying for a service. And if if the service is no longer meeting your needs, what do? You move around, right? It's like having an apartment. It's like when you outgrow your home and you need to buy a bigger home. It's like having a new car and now it's starting to cause issues for you, or it's just no longer serving the needs that you have for it anymore. Or just in anything in general, right? So the first thing you want to do, again, is have a conversation like, what can I do to make this more beneficial or to ensure that my needs are being met? Have a conversation. Really write down, okay, which of my needs are not being met? What was my promise when I started? And again, the promise might have been met, but now you have new needs. And so your goal is to have that conversation with your supervisor. I always tell people conflict leads to growth. So that's not to say that you're going to be in conflict with your supervisor because your needs are no longer being met. It just means that you may need to have a difficult conversation. And just because it's your supervisor doesn't mean that you can't have a conversation with them about what you need going forward. Your supervisor should be open to growth. They should be open to change. And they also should be open to making sure that your needs are always being met, especially because you are paying for a service. Now, again, you may think that there's this power struggle dynamic because they're up here and you're down here, essentially on paper, right? You're paying for a service, and regardless of them being your supervisor, they're not always right. They're not always perfect, and they're not always on their toes, right? In the beginning, they may always be on their toes, or they may start not on their toes and then get on their toes, and then they may fall back off their toes. So just being mindful that you as a supervisee or an associate or a provisionally licensed provider can have a difficult conversation so that your supervisor can grow and so that you can continue growing. Because again, you're paying for a service. Now, again, if your supervisor charges you anywhere from $300 to $750, that's car note and car insurance together, right? and you get everything you need out of your vehicle. It gets you from point A to point B. So if you have a supervisor that is not getting you from point A to point B, and no matter how much work you put into it or how many conversations you've had with them, if it's no longer meeting your needs, it's time to move on. But again, don't make that decision without trying to have a conversation about what it is that you actually need as a supervisee in your supervisory experience, right? The next reason, so the first reason is if your needs are no longer being met, but again, have a conversation first. The second reason would be is when there is high conflict. If you have a supervisor that maybe y'all are just not a good fit, maybe they're type A personality and you're like, no, that doesn't work for me, or whether their personality or your personality just don't fit each other, it's okay to change supervisors. Now, if it's becoming high conflict, the code of ethics states that a supervisor's job is to make sure that we manage conflict or try to mitigate any issues that we have before referring you out. So if you feel like there's conflict, 9 times out of 10, your supervisor probably feels like there's conflict because there's this mirroring effect that happens. Now, if in your experiences in life, you experience high conflict with a lot of people in your life, it may not be your supervisor, it may be you. And I'm not saying that to say that you're a bad person, but what I'm saying is before you determine if your supervisor is attacking you, you want to make sure that you do a true inventory of your life and say, is it me? Because this is something that happens in all areas of my life, or is it really just a disconnect with me and my supervisor, right? So if it's high conflict, try to resolve the issues internally if you know it's a you problem. But again, you have to be aware and you have to be open to having that difficult conversation with yourself. So if you're in a high conflict supervisory experience, your supervisor is probably going to refer you out anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But if they don't, because not all supervisors are the same, if they don't try to implement a growth plan, or if they don't try to further develop the relationship that you have with them, if they don't try to resolve the issue, you probably need a new supervisor. Now, again, you're paying for a service. So don't blow $500, $750, $300, whatever you're paying, don't blow it on a supervisor that you don't get along with. Because if you're not getting along with your supervisor, 9 times out of 10, you're not getting the experience, the support, the expertise, and the guidance that you need. It's more of a passive exchange. Okay, you paid your supervisor fee. You showed up to supervision, check. All right, I'm getting paid anyway. You don't want that to be your experience because, again, if you're under supervision for anywhere from 18 months to 2 years or 24 months and you're spending $500 a month, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of $500. Again, we're going to go with 500 just for the sake of numbers. 500 times 12 months is $6,000. And you do that over a 2-year span, that's $12,000 you just threw in the drain, and you have nothing to show for it. You don't know how to operate your own practice. You don't know how to mitigate conflict with the clients that you serve. You don't know how to be innovative in your approach to therapy. You don't know nothing because it was passive. They didn't set aside extra time to make sure that your needs were being met, but they also didn't take the time to resolve it in a professional way. They were passive and they took your money. So being a supervisor is not the same as being a therapist in so many ways. And this is one of them, because as a clinician, the code of ethics state that you cannot overtreat a client and you need to terminate a relationship that is no longer beneficial to your clients. So in supervision, there's nothing that says that for us. So if you have a supervisor and you realize that your needs are not being met and then there is high conflict, they don't have to refer you out. They can just take your money. But if you're not vocal, you will be throwing money down the drain. So just be mindful of that. Your needs are no longer being met. Have the conversation first. High conflict, look inside first. Do an inventory, talk to your friends, talk to old supervisors, talk to old coworkers and say, hey, am I a difficult person to work with? What are some things that you foresee that I do in the professional space that would cause an issue for you if you were leading me? Have those conversations with yourself. The other thing is, the last one, right, is if you're seeking something different and the supervisor is not knowledgeable or able to support in a new area for you. So for example, let's say you come into supervision with the idea that, oh, I just want to learn how to do therapy. Okay, great. I want to learn how to operate my own practice. Okay, but this person doesn't have experience in it and they have no knowledge of it and they don't have resources to be able to provide you with further support. You may want to supplement your supervisory experience with a different supervisor. Now, I will say, again, if you're spending $500 in supervision, you better be getting more than just how to do therapy and how to handle difficult clients. You better be getting more than that, right? You better be getting something that is going to propel you in the direction in which you wish to go. So again, you have to have another conversation with yourself. It's like, where do I want to be as a clinician in 5 to 10 years? And this supervisor that I have, are they mirroring where I want to go? Now, you may be an innovative clinician where there may be some things that's not out there, that's not happening just yet, and that's okay. But does this supervisor, or are they able to provide the basis of that? For example, again, you now know how to do therapy. All right, so what else can my supervisor give me? Okay, maybe they can teach me sand tray. That's something I want to know. They're certified, they're trained, they have a certificate in it. Maybe they can teach me play therapy techniques because I want to work with children, or I work in a school setting, in an elementary setting, and this works perfect. And I can integrate, implement, and utilize it. Maybe this supervisor does EMDR and I want to be able to implement and utilize EMDR in my therapeutic experiences with my clients. Again, maybe it's, I want to know more about private practice and how to operate, scale, and grow. Or maybe this supervisor has experience in public speaking and I want to know more about how to get on the stage. That's what I want to do. So these are three really big things that can cause you to find another supervisor. Now, again, if you're in the state of Texas, you can have up to 2 supervisors. So maybe even having a conversation with your supervisor, maybe you like your supervisor and you need to supplement your supervisory experience with another supervisor. Maybe you do group with the supervisor you currently have, since y'all have this great established relationship, and maybe the fee is cut in half and you only see them twice a month. Or maybe you go over here to and you supplement and you meet with a supervisor who gives you that other 50% of individual that can do the one-on-one with scaling and building and growing a private practice. So, be thinking about that. You don't always have to fire your supervisor. Of course, you can't hire your supervisor, but you don't always have to terminate your supervisory experience with your supervisor. You can have difficult conversations. You can try to work the kinks out. And if it doesn't work, it's okay to find a new supervisor. Trust and believe. There will be 1,000,001 supervisees, associates, or provisionally licensed clinicians that are moving. A lot of supervisors get supervisees that are coming from other supervisors. So if it happens to us, it doesn't harm us. It just means, okay, well, can you give me some feedback on what I could have done different, or what I could have done better, or things that I could have changed to make your experience better? Now, again, not everybody is going to be open to that feedback, but in your exit, be sure to highlight that, hey, I met with you on this date, this day, this day. We talked about things that I need. On these dates, they were not delivered. I continue to reach out. I continue to try to do X, Y, and Z, and my needs weren't being met, i.e. I decided that it was no longer beneficial to me and that I would seek another supervisor. Now, be mindful. If you are switching supervisors, you want to be mindful that your new supervisor, whoever you switch to, they're going to want to talk to your previous supervisor. So just make sure that if you do leave, make sure you leave in health. Even if it's a high conflict situation, just say, hey, we're two different people. We can agree to disagree. I think that to lighten your load and the amount of work and the amount of resistance that we have amongst each other, I need to walk away. So just making sure that you know how to use the correct and appropriate language, and even sending an email after you meet with that supervisor to make sure that your language or the usage, the word choice that you're using isn't aggressive, right? So that if you do have a supervisor that you are reaching out to possibly switch to, and they meet with your previous supervisor and they say, well, I'm going to reach out to your previous supervisor. If the previous supervisor gives them a bad review or feedback on you, and that supervisor decides not to take you back or take you in, then you can take a step back and say, well, here's my email thread. Like, I'm not this person that they painted me out to be in the conversation that you had with them. I've not been on a growth plan. I have not had any reprimands. I have not done anything unethical. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from. And then even probably provide them with access to maybe an associate who's a peer to you, who has maybe the same supervisor, and y'all are frequently on the same meetings. So I'm not going to keep going down that rabbit hole, but this video is really more so, when should you find a new supervisor? So I would say those are the 3 cases. Now, the other case that I did not mention that is always going to be probably the first reason is if your supervisor is unethical. Now, again, we're not perfect. So we may unintentionally do or say something or engage in something, and we're like, you know what? My bad. And we go back and we correct ourselves and say, no, that actually was unethical, or whatever the situation is, right? You want to make sure that you are operating under an ethical supervisor, because what happens is if that supervisor is unethical, there's going to come a day where maybe someone is going to report them for their unethical behaviors. And if that happens, you're out of a supervisor anyway. So I said all that to say is that there's 4 main reasons. The very first foremost is if your supervisor is unethical. If they're not signing your hours, your logs, if they're not meeting with you, they're not starting on time, if they are inappropriate, if they try to engage in a dual relationship with you, if they try to exert power, those are great reasons to get a new supervisor. The second reason, of course, is when your needs are no longer being met. Of course, have a conversation, see if the supervisor can provide the change or accommodate your new needs or your current needs that have changed. And then the third one is high conflict. If you have a supervisor you're constantly having disagreements with, y'all are probably just not a great fit personality-wise. There's nothing that you can do or that supervisor can do to make the relationship better, if that is the case. Now, there are some situations where, supervisors become resentful of some of the things that their supervisees do. And it's kind of hard to terminate a relationship with a supervisor a supervisee that you firmly believe in. And you're like, but you know what? I'm gonna see it through, right? If you're a supervisee and you see that you're a supervisor and you are just not a good fit, it's okay for you to terminate first too. That's okay. And then the fourth reason, of course, is if you are in need of something more and your supervisor is not able to give it to you. Again, in all of these cases, you can probably supplement your supervisor. At least in Texas, I know you can have 2. Some states, you can only have 1 supervisor at a time. So regardless of what state you are in your supervisory protocol, if you're paying for supervision, please don't throw money down the drain. If your needs are not being met, if they're high conflict, if they're unethical, you need to be probably looking for a new supervisor. And it's okay to consult with another supervisor somewhere else to determine if it makes sense for you to walk away. Now, of course, most supervisors are going to have the difficult conversation with you if you go to consult with someone before making that decision. But that's not to say that your reasonings are valid or not valid, even if they agree or disagree, that you should move on with the supervisor that you currently have. So again, if you are in a pickle and you're not really sure if you really want to terminate that relationship, it's okay to consult with just another supervisor and say, hey, this is my experience. What are your thoughts? This is what I'm struggling with. How should I proceed as an associate? I know I'm not your supervisor or your provisionally licensed clinician, but how should I proceed with my supervisor? We're high conflict. I've tried this, I've tried that. I've done everything I could. I want to get another lens or a third party to have a conversation with me about what I should do next. That's also okay. So we'll pause here. And, I'll keep rolling out these videos for those who are still new into the industry, still trying to determine like what their purpose is in the counseling space. I know this video was kind of long, but I hope that the information that I shared is helpful. So again, my name is Asha Creary. I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas and an approved supervisor in the state of Missouri. Hopefully, really, really soon, I'll have my license to be a supervisor in Texas at some point. But I do also have a private practice in Austin, in Round Rock and in Killeen. So feel free to like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. Feel free to reach out, just engage, have fun. I answer questions in the comment section. So if you have a question that I didn't answer in regard to this particular subject or topic, feel free to drop a question. I'll answer it and I'll respond to it. So I'm out, y'all.